When I was just a little boy, I had only heard about flying saucers once, adults discussing UFOs around 1961. The abduction of Betty and Barney Hill came up after watching an episode of The Twilight Zone. Much later, as an adult, I was browsing the local newspaper and spotted a bold headline on page 3. Asterisk, New Hampshire. Married couple communicates with aliens. Asterisk, naturally, I was intrigued. In our town, stories like that were unheard of. I carefully read the article in which two people claimed they had been abducted by aliens and spent some time aboard an interplanetary spacecraft. My first thought was that this must be a ridiculous joke. Then I began to wonder if I had ever heard anything similar before. Soon, the story gained international attention. To this day, it is considered one of the most credible and well-studied UFO encounters, second in fame only to the Roswell incident. I'm willing to believe that people might see strange flying objects, but actually visiting a flying saucer? No way. In 1961, Barney Hill, a black man, was 39 years old and worked for the U.S. Postal Service. His wife, a white woman aged 41, held a master's degree and headed a child welfare department. I emphasized the fact that they were an interracial couple. Everyone who knew the Hills said Barney was deeply stressed about their relationship due to public ridicule. In the early 1960s, constant mockery of such marriages was socially acceptable. In researching Mr. Hill's life, I found no signs of any psychological issues that would prompt him to invent such a story. After their encounter with the UFO became public, attention shifted from their interracial marriage to their mysterious alien encounter. Barney feared judgment. Why would he make up a flying saucer story and invite more attention? The Hill story began in September 1961 in New Hampshire. Barney had recently suffered a stomach ulcer flare-up, so the couple decided to take a short vacation to Canada. They visited Montreal, enjoyed the beauty of Niagara Falls, and headed home to Portsmouth on September 19th. They were traveling through the central part of New Hampshire along Route 3, a remote area surrounded by endless forest. Fortunately, the night was clear and the crescent moon brightly lit the sky. At around 10:15 p.m., 3 miles south of Lancaster, Barney noticed what looked like a bright star or planet moving erratically across the sky. He pointed it out to Betty, and they both began observing the strange, glowing object. They initially assumed it was a plane. As they drove, the object would disappear behind trees and then reappear on the horizon. Barney later recalled trying to convince both himself and Betty that it was just an airplane, but Betty disagreed, insisting it was something else, possibly a strange flying craft. North of Woodstock, the object began moving in an entirely unpredictable trajectory. Barney stopped the car and stepped out with binoculars to get a closer look. He saw multicolored lights and many windows on an oval-shaped craft with a flat bottom, which seemed to be heading toward him. When the saucer was just 100 feet away, he even claimed to see figures inside. Terrified, he ran back to the car, jumped in, and sped away. The next 2 hours vanished without a trace. As they drove home, the Hills no longer saw the UFO but heard 2 sets of strange beeping sounds. Suddenly, they realized they were 25 miles further down the road than they had been a moment earlier. How they got there, and what had happened during those missing hours, they couldn't recall. They were already in the Ashland suburbs. They drove the rest of the way home in silence. Once home, they couldn't sleep. The next day, Betty called her sister Janet and told her everything. Her sister advised her to contact the nearby Pease Air Force Base and report the incident to authorities. Betty followed her advice and spoke with Major Paul W. Henderson, who confirmed that their radar had detected a UFO in the area at the time. Notably, Barney was strongly opposed to involving the military, hoping to keep the incident private. At that time, the Hills didn't remember being abducted or visiting a spaceship. However, Betty began experiencing recurring nightmares featuring herself and Barney being held against their will aboard an alien craft. Weeks later, 2 journalists learned of the story, interviewed the couple, and published the details in a magazine article. It was the journalists who first pointed out the missing 2-hour gap in the Hills' recollection. Even with stops to walk their dog, who had traveled with them, there was no accounting for the lost time. Another oddity, the names of the 2 journalists are never mentioned in any reports of the incident. At least, I've never been able to find them. There's strong reason to believe this story is true, particularly due to the involvement of James McDonald, a former Air Force intelligence officer. After Betty's nightmares began, she wrote to Major Donald Kehoe, who passed the letter to Walter Webb, a scientific advisor for the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP. What Webb did with the letter remains unknown. Around the same time, Major McDonald suggested the Hills undergo regression hypnosis to recover memories from the missing 2 hours. In spring 1962, the Hills agreed to see a psychiatrist, though they postponed the visit due to Betty's continued nightmares and a flare-up of Barney's ulcer and blood pressure. Before long, they contacted Dr. Benjamin Simon, one of the most respected psychiatrists and neurologists of that era. After several meetings, Dr. Simon's preliminary diagnosis was that the Hills suffered from anxiety syndrome related to the incident on September 19, 1961. His next goal was to recover the lost memories from that terrifying night. Dr. Simon chose regression hypnosis as the method to treat the Hills and uncover the source of their trauma. Barney underwent hypnosis first, followed later by Betty. The process was slow, but after 6 months, Dr. Simon concluded that the Hills had indeed been abducted and were aboard an unknown flying craft that September night. For those interested in more details, the book The Interrupted Journey by John G. Fuller chronicles the Hills story. It also inspired 2 Look magazine articles and a 1976 film, The UFO Incident, starring Estelle Parsons as Betty and James Earl Jones as Barney. After many sessions in Dr. Simon's office, the following emerged. The Hills' car was blocked by an alien ship that had landed in the middle of the road. The couple was taken aboard and subjected to thorough medical examinations by the aliens, who then implanted a suggestion to forget everything before releasing them. The Hills described the aliens as bald extraterrestrial beings about 5 feet tall, with gray skin, pear-shaped heads, and cat-like eyes. This was the first known mention of what would later be called the Greys. The couple was examined separately. Both their physical and intellectual traits were studied. While aboard the ship, samples of their skin, hair, and nails were taken. Betty had a long needle inserted into her abdomen, explained by the aliens as a pregnancy test. Barney, under pressure, provided a sperm sample. The Hills got the impression that the aliens had very different perceptions of time and space compared to humans. The aliens were surprised to find that Barney had dentures. When Betty asked one alien where they were from, she was shown a point on a star map. After everything that happened, the Hills found themselves back in their car, and the last thing they remembered was an orange glow fading into the night sky. It's important to note that the Hills made great efforts to keep the incident private, but the media proved persistent, and the story soon became public knowledge. Dr. Simon refused to give interviews. Everything he learned from the couple was protected by medical confidentiality. The only public statement he made, under pressure, was that the Hills' story was authentic. As the story gained worldwide attention, 2 more experts took interest. One was Dr. J. Allen Hynek, then a professor of astronomy at Northwestern University who later worked as a consultant to the U.S. Air Force and founded his own UFO research center. The other was Stanton T. Friedman, a nuclear physicist who dedicated his free time to studying extraterrestrial phenomena. The Hills' detailed reports, made under hypnosis, matched perfectly, even though neither knew what the other had said or what questions would be asked. They both described being in separate rooms aboard the alien craft, being examined much like humans study animals, and then being made to forget everything before being released.